Paperback Rocker, episode 59. Hey, this is Matt Severson, the Paperback Rocker, and I'm broadcasting from my 6x9 foot cinder block shack in the desert of northern Mexico, southern Texas. Welcome and thanks for checking out my show.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Kesar from the Artist Connection podcast. You're listening to the Paperback Rocker with my good friend Matt Severson. Enjoy.
Broadcasting from a 9-foot cinder block shack somewhere in the desert. It's the Paperback Rocker Show.
Hey everybody, what's up? It's your old friend Matt, back again with my little podcast, the Paperback Rocker Show. That place where I am reading from my novel Blue Whiskey. In essence, making an audiobook version of it for you to listen to. I want to say, first of all, this episode is dedicated to my very, very good friend Annie Rich in Mississippi. I want to say hi, a special hello to her before this episode. And I also want to apologize a little bit for the bad accent I did on the guitar teacher part. I have not pre-prepped in any way, and I didn't even realize that was coming up on me, and it just happened. So it is what it is. But anyway, we are starting chapter 3 tonight on page 19. If you're following along, there is a hardback available via Amazon or me, paperbackrocker.com or paperbackrocker@live.com is my email. Get a copy, or it's on Kindle. Blue Whiskey by Matt Severson. Chapter 3. I left home on my 17th birthday. Back then people did that. Guys, at least. I was mature for my age and sick of my family, especially Tempest. I came up with that nickname shortly after the captain's death. At first my mom scolded me, but eventually we all called her Tempest. Don't get me wrong, Tempest is a genius. She's a savant in the medium of filmmaking and has an Oscar to prove it. Her fascination with movies started when my father gave her the captain's 8mm camera. The captain sort of left it to my father when he died. The only contact information in the captain's wallet after his heart attack was my father's, so his possessions became ours. Tempest got the camera, and I got his Chevy. She got to use her inheritance immediately, but I had to wait since I was 13 when the captain passed away and 16 when I got my license. Even after 3 years of waiting, my father only let me drive my Chevy to school, and I had to take Temp with me, of course. It may seem unfair that my sister got a relatively inexpensive camera and I got a whole car, but we both accepted what our father gave us without protestation. Temperance gloated for 3 whole years running around with that 8mm while I waxed and polished my dormant vehicle. Once in a while, my father let me start it just to make sure the motor didn't seize up. Tempest started with short films, using dead insects as her actors. She made hundreds starring dead cicadas, with their discarded exoskeletons used to represent ghosts and other apparitions. How that led to an Oscar is anybody's guess, but she has the most vivid imagination of anyone I've ever known. I'm sure she'll go on and on about it in her autobiography, so enough about Tempest. The movie camera in the Chevy came accompanied by a cat with what seemed to me at the time 100 toes. He was an orange and black Tom named Ernest, after Hemingway, and my father swore the thing had originally been owned by the writer. I doubted it growing up, but I don't know why, since I had no idea who this writer Hemingway was. Unlike most boys who believe every boast from their dad, true or not, I was skeptical of every accomplishment my father ever told me about. At least after I saw him driving for Maestro Segovia. Yes, that's messed up, but disputing my father's exploits helped me escape the pressure of feeling like I had to live up to him. I don't dispute the cat's lineage now, since I've read the story of where my father got the cat. It was in my father's diary, which is where I found almost all of what I'm writing now. But I'm getting way ahead of myself divulging that. It makes perfect sense because that cat with the extra toes was just like my father, always rubbing up against somebody famous. In my father's case, it was Faulkner, and in Ernest's case, it was Hemingway, and then my father. When the captain passed away, a sheriff from Muskegon, Michigan, found his body. The captain was sitting in the driver's seat of his panel van with his eyes open, looking out on Lake Michigan. My father said the captain had always joked that when he saw a lake as big as an ocean, he'd be ready to die. Guess he never thought he'd really see a lake that big. That sheriff seemed to perceive the captain as an important man, even in death. He called my father that night when we were eating our special ham dinner and arranged to deliver the captain's Chevy to us in Oxford. Part of the deal my father struck with the sheriff involved the transportation of the captain's remains as well. The panel van was pretty much the same as a hearse, so the captain's last voyage was from Michigan to Mississippi by land. The sheriff stayed with us the night he arrived, in my bed. My mother fixed another special dinner, and my father told the sheriff the captain's life story as we ate. The sheriff said he wanted to hear it. We all wanted to hear it. We knew practically nothing about the patriarch of our family, much less the man who had practically been his stand-in father. The next morning, my father drove the sheriff and the captain down to New Orleans, and the sheriff flew back to Michigan from there. My father arranged to have the captain buried while he was there. Excuse me. New Orleans was special to the two of them. I erred when I said buried. Excuse me, I got something in my throat. The captain was entombed. They don't bury people in New Orleans because the city is below sea level. My father found a cemetery where the caretaker promised to build a tomb so the captain could rest in peace facing the Mississippi River. I wasn't there, but I know that giving the captain the proper bon voyage was as important to my father as anything he ever did. I got to see the tomb eventually, but that's down the road. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I guess I should explain a bit about why I turned out the way I did. I'm not like my father at all, at least on the surface. The older I get, the more I notice similarities, but I'd really be getting ahead of myself if I went into that now. My father was an intellectual. He didn't start out that way, but that's probably why he latched onto it so tight when he got the reputation of a man of letters. He thought he needed to act a certain way, which in a word was serious. The only time I ever saw my father smile was on Thanksgiving. The one day of the year he would let his guard down and unfurl a slight upward curl in his lip. Christmas Day was always horrible, but Thanksgiving was the best day of the year. I didn't understand it when I was young, but I do now. My father's childhood coincided with the Great Depression, and that shaped his whole life. That's not unique. It did that for a lot of people. The Depression affected me too, even though I was a generation removed from it. You only have to think about it for a minute to understand why my father loved Thanksgiving and hated Christmas. Thanksgiving meant something to him, and Christmas didn't. It all goes back to the Depression, like almost everything else. Thanksgiving meant giving thanks for the things we had, no matter how meager, and my father was filled with genuine gratitude. He was thankful his family had made it through another year healthy and well-fed. Depression survivors take nothing for granted. Thinking about it as an adult, I can't help but compare those grapes of wrath types from the Dust Bowl to the Jews who survived the Holocaust. There's a similarity in their survival. It's faith in something bigger than yourself, and it's one of the reasons I believe in higher power. I loved those Thanksgivings growing up. My father was always proud and happy, and I basked in that warmth. I felt his approval, which was what I wanted all the other days of the year, but rarely received. Christmas Day during the Depression was not much better than a lump of coal, which explains why my father hated the holiday. Actually, I don't think it was hate, it was depression with a small d in this case. The day brought memories back to him, most of them sparse and threadbare. Not having any other point of reference, my sister and I grew up thinking the holiday was a somber one. We did receive presents, but they were things like underwear and socks. The best Christmas gift I ever gave my father was homemade and purely by accident. I didn't know this for decades, at which time I didn't even remember giving my father the present, but his diary reminded me of it. It was 1957 and I was 12 years old. I got the idea from my 7th grade teacher who had also grown up during the Depression. His name was Mr. Looper. He was the first male instructor I ever had, and he influences me to this day. He was a science teacher, but he taught me more about life than I ever learned about science. Good teachers do that. One day he said something off the cuff about young people not understanding gratitude. When he said that, it was like a challenge to me because I thought I was kind of rare. After class soon after, I stayed to ask him what gratitude meant. I remember it was the last day of school before Christmas break. I don't know what made me do it, but I blame it on enchanted serendipity, which you will see has played an important role in my life. Tell me the truth about gratitude, I said. That was a challenge to him, since I had added the truth to my statement. Mr. Looper was standing over his desk, arranging papers to take home. He stopped when he heard my question. Gratitude means appreciating the things you are thankful for, Stanton. It's no more complicated than that. Do you understand? I think so, but what am I supposed to do? You don't have to do anything. It's a philosophical concept. When I told you about lightning, you didn't have to get struck by it to understand what I was talking about, right? Am I confusing you? Mr. Looper was a first-year teacher, and this was one of the first conversations of this type he had engaged in, and he was a bit rattled by it. No, I understand, I said, enjoying the mature discourse with the teacher I so admired. I didn't say anything else, which made clear to Mr. Looper that I didn't at all understand. Let me try to make it clearer, he said. I'm very impressed by your curiosity. I suppressed a smile. When I'm talking about gratitude, I mean being thankful for things in your life, but sometimes it's not obvious. Like with my father. He's dead, but I'm thankful for all he taught me. I didn't appreciate him while he was with me. We didn't get along. But after he passed away, I finally understood why he acted like he did. When I had my own son, I understood a lot more. The way I acknowledge and proclaim my appreciation for the blessings in my life is by writing a gratitude list. I do it every Christmas Eve. It's kind of like a prayer or a meditation. Does that make any sense to you? It did. On Christmas Eve, I sat down at my little desk to make my first gratitude list. I'm sure I wasn't as contemplative as Mr. Looper, since writing for any child is not something done without agony. But I did feel something stir in me, which made me for the first time compare my childhood to what little I knew of my father's. I'd heard enough about the Depression to have a reasonable idea of what it was like. The list was a series of I'm glad statements. I'm glad the Depression is over. I'm glad I have a nice house. I'm glad my father bought me a guitar. I'm glad Maestro Segovia taught me. Simple stuff like that. I fell asleep with my head on the finished list, but I woke in the morning in my bed. The list was gone, but I didn't think anything of it, since I was wondering what gifts, if any, I would receive that morning. That was the Christmas I was given my first steel string guitar. Back to the story I started. I left home at the age of 17, like I said. That seems young by today's standards, but I swear it felt like my father was pushing me out the door. He completed high school early and went into the Merchant Marines, so I guess he thought I was getting up in years. He encouraged me to graduate a year ahead, so I did, with the minimum credits required, which weren't all that many. For a man who considered himself a scholar, my father never even talked to me about furthering my education beyond high school. I've got to blame the Depression yet again. If it wasn't for the Depression, it would have to be that he didn't think I was cut out for it, and I don't want to think that. Okay, I'm going to quit there for this episode. I appreciate you hanging out and listening. Hope you're enjoying it. Let me know, and I'll see you soon with another volume of the Blue Whiskey audiobook. Have a good one.
The Paperback Rocker has signed off.